Mr. Garver, sound check. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
All right. We're going live in 1 minute. And this week, I don't know if we have any lenders on. And if we don't, we're going to see if anybody has a success story they want to share before we get started. So let's see if who wants to roll with their success story. Not everybody at once. Maybe that's why they're here, Robert, huh?
Maybe.
They need some more success stories.
Where are you headed, Rob?
Is Terry on?
I am.
So you have a success story, don't you? Or a Zillow one, right?
A Zillow success story.
I thought
Oh,
you had a, yeah, I thought you were talking about it the other day.
well, let me tell you, the reason it's a success is that Frank jumped through 5,000 hoops to help these guys. So that made it a success. And thank God we got the appraisal yesterday and it appraised. Whew.
And how much was that?
Well, 395.
400. Okay. That's a single.
I'm
Or
on my
maybe
way for
maybe
a
a
listing
double.
appointment now.
Wonderful. And
You look like you're flying a plane.
no, I'm a passenger in a vehicle. How's that?
Good.
I'm committed to the process, so the show must go on. All right, so if there's no other success stories and no lenders on, we're getting right to the heart of it. Um, the 7 components to a successful buyer conversation. I think we speak a lot about, the importance of list to last listings, all this stuff about being a successful listing agent. And I think, there's probably even a stigma applied to buyer's agents. Like, oh, you're only a buyer's agent. And it's probably because in the beginning, it's very easy to become a buyer's agent. There's a very low barrier to entry. You get licensed, and historically, buyers didn't have to sign anything. So people would allow you to open doors and, accept or reject your services based upon how you carried yourself. Does that sound about right?
About right, yes.
And now with the advent of the buyer's agency requirement, I think it maybe complicates things a little bit. And I think a lot of us were not thrilled at the onset of how that came about and the process of having to do buyer's agency agreements. But how many of us think that now that we're 7 months into it, or maybe even longer, maybe let's see, maybe 8 months into it, how many of us think that this is ultimately a good thing? Anybody?
Well, it wasn't as bad as I expected.
I do.
Okay. Does anybody see this as a good thing?
I think it's a
I know.
great thing.
Good thing.
Okay. And why is that?
Who were you asking?
Whoever said it was a great thing, was that Mr. Durso?
No, that's Jeff.
Oh, Jeff. Okay. Why is that a great thing, Jeff?
I think it's something we probably should have
We should have done it many years ago, but what's good about it?
been doing.
Not
all
letting
along,
this
buyer to know exactly.
Loyalty, loyalty.
Loyalty, commitment.
It makes it appear to be more of an actuality happening. When I've gotten a few buyers on Zillow and I tell them when I meet you at the house that I'm happy to show you, you're going to have to sign a buyer showing form. And I'm shocked at how many people still have no idea that this exists and they want to know what it entails. And when you go on to explain it to them, they realize, well, this is really a little more serious than just running around calling people and having, kicking tires. So I found that to be an advantage.
Right. And don't you think that all businesses um, to be valued have to evolve over time?
Breaking up.
Did I block out for a second?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we lost you.
Okay. So I said all businesses over time need to evolve, right? I mean, you're not gonna do things, today the same way you did them 50 years ago. However, the real estate industry tends to be a little bit of a slower evolution. Okay. I remember back in the start of my career, um, everybody worked for the seller in New Jersey. Has anybody been in business long enough where they had the buyer's agent worked for the seller? Does anybody remember those days in New Jersey? Right. Now, was it like that in Florida or other states years ago or no?
New
The
York, yes.
buyer's agent.
So then they came out where, even though the seller was paying, you had a duty of loyalty to the buyer. You were now a buyer's agent. That was an evolution one. Now,
Right.
evolution two is now formalizing that agreement. So the sales process is now governed by 3 documents instead of 2. So starts with the seller saying, I want to list my property for sale. You have an exclusive right to sell. Okay. Then the next agreement is the buyer's agency agreement between the buyer's agent and the buyer, right? Exclusive buyer's agency agreement. And then the third is the agreement between the buyer and the seller. Really simple. But because tradition was always that the seller paid and that second agreement was optional in most cases, it became uncomfortable for us to have to go to buyers. And, probably most of the discomfort was our dis-ease about changing the process as opposed to, buyers not coming around to understanding what needs to happen. Would anybody agree with that, or most of you agree with that? Right? And I know that company-wide, our average side actually up about 13 basis points across all the companies. Buyer side action.
We're losing you.
Sure.
Rob, we can't hear you.
Okay, I said
Yeah, you're breaking up.
congratulations. 'Cause so Frank, are you there?
I'm here.
Frank.
All right.
Hi.
So when I have unstable connection here, you can do your mortgage minute if it happens again.
I'll just
And I don't
chime
know
in.
if you were
Exactly.
on. I don't know if you were on when Terry was singing your praises, but if you weren't, we'll
No, but
update
Terry,
you on
can
that
you sing
later.
my praise again so I can hear it?
Yay
I'm
for
teasing. I'm
Frank.
teasing. Call me later.
He got
Thank
my
you.
drama queens to the finish line.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe, and early on, I said that it was going to be a transition. We were going to struggle with changing tradition, but it was ultimately going to be a good change. And those that were committed to the business were actually going to earn more, and that has played out. Not significantly more, but I don't know, what is it, about 8% more? That's a decent raise. So 3 contracts control the transactions. Easy part to have a conversation with a client who hasn't bought in a while. Okay. And in real estate, our fee is a completely contingency based compensation structure. Right. I know we all know that implicitly, but do we ever have that conversation with our clients? Because let me ask this. Ryan, you're good with math, right? Ryan Kelly? Okay, so Ryan, if you have a $1 million transaction and the compensation is 3%, you put the transaction together. You with me so far? You go through the mortgage, you go through all the contingencies, and something happens the day before closing and it doesn't close. How much do you get paid?
Nothing.
Millions.
0, right? So who really assumes the risk in this process?
We do. The agent.
We do, right?
The
So
agent.
Yes, the agent assumes the risk, but I don't think we do a good enough job at identifying that to our clients when we sign a buyer's agency agreement that, hey, if we don't get you across the finish line and you get to decide if you want to buy, our job is to make the process easier and to help you identify and negotiate properties that meet your needs. So in real estate, agents operate under contingency-based compensation structure, meaning that we only get paid when a transaction successfully closes. Unlike salary professionals, agents invest significant time, resource, and financial resources upfront without the guarantee of any payment. Right? In any other industry, this would like be illegal. If you came in and you worked as an admin for a week and I said, I don't like your work, you're fired. You're required to pay them by law. Okay. We only get paid if the transaction is successful.
Rob,
The success of the entire transaction dictates our earnings. Good, Robert, you had something?
I was just going to say the first day that I was in real estate, my manager said to me, don't spend your commission until it's in your bank account. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I live by.
Yep. And also he should have told you to put some money away for Uncle Sam. I
Well,
hope
he
he
did,
said that.
yes. Yeah, that was the other part of the conversation.
Okay. And I don't know, hopefully not many of you have ever gone through a litigation or a lawsuit. But if you ever had gone through a lawsuit or a litigation, would you go to the plaintiff's attorney if you were being sued and ask them for advice?
No,
I think it's obvious the answer is no. Would you go to the plaintiff's attorney who's suing you or your company and try to negotiate a better deal by avoiding paying an attorney to try to save a few dollars?
Yeah.
Probably not, right?
that's a mistake.
It almost never happens, right? And in that same context, okay, if we stop referring to a listing agent and we refer to that listing agent as the seller's agent, I think it reframes the entire process, right? Because if there's a buyer's agent, why do we call it a listing agent? Isn't it really a seller's agent?
Right.
And if you're trying to negotiate the best deal, we're going to talk a little bit about, how we highlight what we do, because is there anyone here that feels that the consumer doesn't understand all the steps in the process? Anybody feel that way? I see a few hands, right? And, I don't think it's a great practice to go through and, there are some of these agents that I've come across in my career that every time they solve a problem, they over dramatize it to try to make themselves feel like they're self-important. I don't think that's the right strategy, but I do think the right strategy is to have a communication up front and explain everything that you do throughout the process. And then you also must do the things that you say you're going to do, right? That's a fair contract, right? You can't say I'm going to do these things and skip steps. So let's start reframing it from a listing agent to the seller's agent, right? And just go through some of my notes. The only reason why somebody would cut us out of the picture is why. Like, why would somebody,
Save money.
decline somebody that's willing to work for free on a contingency? So there's no upfront payment. You're working for free unless you get a successful outcome. Terry says that they will avoid us because they want to save money. I'm going to respectfully disagree with that.
You don't bring value to the
No,
table.
had no
I know
value.
it's not a reality, but in their mind, they think they can save money.
Correct. They don't see the value.
They
That's
don't
the
see the
importance,
value.
Terry. So
Exactly.
they don't see the value in what we do. And why don't they see the value at times, Terry?
Because I'm on a meeting. They don't see the value because they think that we're just door openers.
Because we
they
don't we don't
we don't articulate
articulate
exactly what
the
it is
value.
entailing in our entire job, not just the initial onset
Correct.
of the work.
And our business is very different than a lot of other businesses. If you trade stocks now, right? How, um, how how would you think a stockbroker gets compensated in light of all the changes in that industry? Like, if they sold, if you bought a block of $1 million worth of stock, do you have any idea what the average compensation is for a stockbroker for that?
No,
20% of the transaction.
About 1%.
No.
More
With
than
electronic
that.
with electronic trading, it's the average according to the the securities. I forget what the association is, but the average $1 million block trade of stock, the compensation per a financial advisor is $50.
Wow.
$50. And do you know why that is? Because the process is not complex. Okay. Can David Haller negotiate a better price than Gary Greenacre on a stock? No, there's no negotiation. You put an order in and it fills or it doesn't. Here's the price. You want to buy it or you don't. But real estate is unique. What determines the price of real estate is all the interested parties, right? All the stakeholders. Okay. So it's the seller's agent on how they position it, how they stage it, how they present it. It's the buyer's agent on how they assess strategy to negotiate. The appraiser, there's a lot of people, the home inspector gets involved, right? There are a lot of things that influence the ultimate sales price in a piece of real estate as opposed to trading a stock electronically on an exchange. So, go ahead.
I think one of the most important things you just said was negotiation. I think that's the key. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Colleen, I think it's all of the above, right? Because, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but, we need to, let me just get this terminology correctly here. We need to highlight the complexity and present the simplicity to the process, right? So we need to let them know that it's complex because it is, and then we need to make that complex process simple. Okay. We don't need to take a complex process and explain every step of it and try to become a hero. All the stakeholders, a lot of times, we'll say, oh, well, the market determines the price. Did anybody ever hear that in real estate? Oh, the market determines the price.
sure.
So if you say that, you're minimizing the significance of our entire industry because the market influences doesn't determine the price. Everything influences the price. If you overprice something and it sits on the market for 120 days, are you going to get the same price as if your neighbor with the exact same house puts it on and prices it correctly?
No,
No, the market will punish you by accumulating days on market. So it's not the market that determines the price. It's the whole process that determines the price. Okay. Real estate, a real estate salesperson is the easiest business to get into and one of the most difficult businesses to be successful in. Think about that, right?
that's powerful, yeah.
Pretty easy to get into it, but it's pretty hard to be successful or at least sustainably successful. And I'm going to repeat a few things here, but I'm looking for one quote, which I thought was great. What do you think most real estate professionals' prior industry was before they got into real estate?
Most,
Yeah, what do you think?
Retail?
Retail, it's probably good. What else do you think people have been?
A lot were teachers.
Service business,
Sell cars.
service
pilots.
business.
Yeah,
Restaurant.
yeah. Let me just try to. I want to get this quote correct here because I think it's really powerful. Bear with me a second. And by the way, if you're not familiar, the show notes are included as an attachment to these to the emails that you get, the bombs. If you're not getting the bomb or the email with the video, then you probably mistakenly unsubscribed to it. Okay. And you want to make sure that you get it because, like, instead of sitting here taking notes, it's all here for you. So, wow, what the heck? I think I might have deleted one of my good quotes here, but basically, the profile of somebody gets into real estate is not from a prodigious prospecting or a high culture of making calls before you get into industry. People tend to get in the industry that are teachers, nurses, they're caring, compassionate people. They're not voracious prospect rate is very low because we don't have a culture of prospecting. And just get back here. And one of the podcasts I was listening to, and no offense to all the social workers and everybody else, but the real money is made in the prospecting and the real money is made in the communication, not in the showing of houses. And they put it to an analogy of it's like if you had an engineering firm where nobody studied math, right? If you're in real estate and you're not in a culture of prospecting, you know, let that sink in for a second, right? Would you want to hire an engineer that doesn't know math? No. You want to hire people or you want to develop that culture where you get out of your comfort zone and you get into prospecting because that's what's going to help you even in working with buyers because we're going to talk about uncovering markets and let me just unlocking value and unlocking markets. Robert Garver probably 2 or 3 times on these presentations or these masterminds. We talked about when there's no inventory. I don't know if you recall what you've said in the past, Robert. If there's no inventory and everybody's complaining, they want to buy a house in 4-bedroom house in Booton for under $1 million that was built after 1990, and there's absolutely nothing on the market.
That's when we have to get out into the street and find houses.
Okay, and what are some ways that you are empowered as opposed to a helpless complainer? I remember one example you gave us that stuck with me, and every time I hear somebody else say it, I'm like giving you kudos.
Tell me.
You forgot it, huh? Do you remember when I think you called a competitor of yours, Anthony, said, "Do you have anything
Oh,
coming
yeah,
on in this?"
absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you want to
no,
you want to share
so,
that success story?
so here's the thing. So we always talk about how important it is to establish relationships with other agents in a positive manner. So that the story that Rob is referring to is I got a call from a client who wanted to buy a house in Booton Township. They could spend up to this amount of money and they knew there was nothing on the market, but could I find something? So I called a friend of mine who does a lot of business in Booton Township. And I said, "Hey, Tony, what are you working on? I've got a buyer who's well qualified. They can spend up to this amount of money and they're ready to go." And his response to me was, "You know what? I'm on my way to a house right now to talk to the sellers about listing it so that, you've been good to me in the past, which I had been on a specific transaction." He said, "So as soon as I get this signed up, you're the one going in, and I'll send you my pictures ahead of time before they get posted on the MLS, and we'll put this deal together." So out of nowhere, just the relationship that I had established, which was also, it was an interesting story how that relationship came about. I had a listing and a couple came to see the house and I showed them all around the house and they really liked it. And I said, okay, so, we can write this up right now if you'd like, and get it done. And they said, well, we'd really like to have an agent representing us, not you representing both the seller and the buyer. So could you recommend somebody? So this house would happen to be in Bruton Township, so I called, my friend, and I said, hey, here's a deal for you. These people are ready to buy this house. They just want somebody else to write it up, so it's yours. I'll take a referral fee, but it's yours. And it was over $1 million house. So that set him up to want to do something for me going forward, and that played out very well.
Yep. So you unlocked inventory that didn't exist, right? It was
Correct.
magical. And, I suspect if that circumstance arose again, you would figure out a way to find something, if you had a committed buyer, especially if it was a client that you'd served in the past. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, is a buyer's agent harder or easier than being a seller's agent?
More
Harder,
difficult.
way harder and more expensive.
Okay. Anybody else have an opinion on that?
Depends on the client completely.
Okay, depends. That's good.
Well,
So
Lisa,
I would say that being a good buyer's agent probably takes a bigger commitment, right? To get that job done,
Yep.
because you need to identify, neighborhoods and submarkets. You need to understand those areas. You need to help people digest and make decisions. You generally spend more time one-on-one with a seller or a buyer. What would you think?
Seller, the buyer.
We hear, was
Buyer.
that a buyer? Anybody think?
I,
Unless you have a hard, and when you're spending time with a seller, most of that's on the phone. When you're with a buyer, you're face to face. So I think, that buyer experience is a lot more you dependent, right? I think a buyer is more like a buyer's agent's more like a veterinarian as opposed to a knee surgeon, because you need to be able to treat a bird and a horse at the same time, because you're going into different markets as opposed to being highly specialized in where you may be the living queen. Um, value, and this is really important. Value must be internalized so that you can have a world-class experience and presentation conversation. Okay. Because sometimes we get into our own head and say, hey, why does this person want to sign a buyer agency agreement with me? Because really haven't done anything yet. Or if I just opened the door, they're going to be like, I don't want to pay you 3%, 2.5%, 2, whatever that is. So we must first internalize value so that we can communicate what we do. Um, and I'm going to just give you some examples of why it's important for you to learn how to communicate in order to save buyers from, maybe not being buyers, and help them understand the process. Um, have you ever, on any of your listings, received a offer that was maybe emailed to you without a phone call, sloppily presented? Um, Sometimes the numbers don't even add up. Has anybody ever seen or had a colleague that gotten a horrific offer that didn't even make sense,
Lisa, you get those every week.
right? But do you think that the person that is submitting that offer, is it their fault or is it the selection of who they aligned with? What do you think?
It's the agent's fault.
Yeah, it's the agent's fault. And the reason why they picked that agent is because somebody was unable to communicate the significance and the value that exist on a buyer side representation. Okay. Here's something that is in the handout, but I want everybody to write this down. So I'll give you a second to get a pen or maybe take a note in your phone. When you're working with a buyer, you want to ask them this question. What do you expect from your buyer's agent?
Oh.
And if you're afraid to ask that, then you need to make sure that you can deliver a compensation worthy experience. But what do you think most people are going to say if you say, what do you expect from your buyer's agent?
To find me the perfect house,
I'm sorry?
to find me the property that I'm desiring to buy.
And to negotiate,
Um,
negotiate well.
They might not
That's
even
so-
know how to
part of the
answer.
process.
Help you save money.
Yeah.
So here's the response that you give in virtually every one of those cases, because I think that we have only hit the tip of the iceberg with the value proposition. Okay, you say this, with all due respect, with all due respect, you're not expecting enough. With all due respect, you're not expecting enough. Here is what we produce. Here is what I produce. Okay, and you can outline what it is that you produce. Okay, and this is in the handout as well, the attachment. Okay, you know, the 7 A's of buyer agency: agency, fiduciary duty, access to properties, arrange appointments, apprise and negotiate, answer questions, administer the transaction. Once it goes under contract, there's a lot of work to do. And then, after the sales service, those are the 7 A's of a buyer agency. Okay. The goal is to bring to you guys, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So I was saying, do you think that your buyers would want to have an unfair advantage? So in the conversation, the goal is to bring you an unfair advantage by working with me. And this is accomplished by plugging into success. I don't think people see an unfair advantage to working with most buyers agents. I think they see door openers and perhaps negotiators, but they don't understand the entire ecosystem. Right? So, having the conversation, let's say that the table stakes for working with buyers is that you know what you're doing, right? And if you know what you're doing, we're going to have a much higher probability of a favorable outcome if we do all the right steps. And step one, where I think a lot of people struggle, is they don't pre-qualify the buyer properly. They don't pre-qualify the prospect, because there can be somebody that's financially qualified, but that's not pre-qualified, is it? Right? They have to be motivationally pre-qualified. They have to be ready to transact when the reasonable opportunity presents itself. Right? If I say pre-qualified, don't you think 90% of real estate professionals think of just the lending? What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yes, that's right.
Right?
They
But
do.
lending is only part of the process. It's only part. Motivation is probably even more important, because I've seen people that aren't pre-qualified today but are super motivated, and they'll figure a way to get financially pre-qualified to complete the process. Whereas, somebody who has the means but not the motivation, can waste months of time. And how do we get paid if we spend a lot of time and they don't buy it? We get zero. Okay. In an age where buyers struggle to see the value that buyers agents provide, and these buyers often see buyers agents as an obstacle to a better outcome, or check this out, a fee pirate who just opens doors and shows homes. I like that term, a fee pirate, right? That's the ultimate definition of lack of value, or maybe lack of communicated value, right? You could have value, but if there's no perceived value, you have no value. Okay. We must showcase compelling value to counteract this perception. You have to be comfortable yourself with the communication and the conversation. Because if you're not comfortable, there's no way somebody else is going to be comfortable and is going to be attracted to you and your services. Real estate sales, easiest to get into, hardest to succeed. You can never make someone comfortable until you're comfortable yourself. You probably can't be comfortable unless you're competent and prepared. You win through reputation and preparation. Okay. Um, we talk about like the three levels of knowledge. There's, I know what's going on, I understand what's going on, or I can teach and explain what's going on. Okay, that's a borrowed, maybe not said word for word, but that's a keeping current matters mantra. Okay, you need to become unconsciously competent through your preparation and education. You need to become unconsciously competent through your preparation and education. So there are people that are really smart. There are people that are gifted and knowledgeable, but if you don't prepare, you can compromise your performance in the red zone where that's where it really counts. And that's a football analogy to you get in the 20-yard line to the goal line. There are teams that perform really well in the red zone, and then there are teams that choke in the red zone. Okay. In real estate, the red zone is getting the buyer's agency agreement signed. It's getting the expectations set. It's getting the client to believe in our knowledge and process, right? That's the red zone. We need to talk about unlocking value, right? In the information age, many buyers feel they know more than us. Which is true in the case of inexperienced, uneducated, or undercommitted agents. We need to showcase the complexity and deliver simplicity. We need to showcase the complexity and deliver simplicity. Does that sound like something that would be really valuable to a client?
Absolutely. I think that is precious.
How do agents provide value? Stages through the buyer's journey, most buyers don't know. Okay. And without insulting somebody, you can say, most buyers don't know this, right? So you're not insulting them. And if they do know it, you can be like, well, I knew you were really educated and prepared. You can spin it any way to help build your relationship and enhance the value proposition. First is pre-approval. Okay. I think most buyers get this wrong. Okay. And many agents get it wrong as well. Having a pre-approval from some unrecognized brand and somebody that's not in the industry, if you call them up and they can't make a compelling case for your client, is that providing a service or probably pushing you away from what could be your house? A competent agent knows how to leverage the pre-approval to enhance negotiations. Home search. A lot of buyers think that they look online or you set them up for an automatic search. They find the property, they say, hey, come open the door. That's really not the value that we provide. Most agents wait for you to find a home and hope you contact them to show it. You should be giving them access to unsold inventory, sharing with them expireds, withdrawns, pocket listings like Mr. Garver did. Talk to other dominant agents, find out if anything's coming on, unlock inventory through direct marketing. And you can do door knocking or digital door knocking through social media or mail. But I don't think consumers know that. I think they just say, hey, something's going to appear on Zillow. And then when it appears on Zillow, I'm going to reach out to one agent that's going to win the lottery that day. Do you think a lot of consumers feel that way?
Yes. Yes.
And whose fault is it? Is that Zillow's fault?
No,
Whose fault is it?
Speak up, Ryan.
So that would be our fault because we did not translate that message to them that we have all this inventory and the stuff that they don't see just on Zillow.
Correct. So, today is a shout out. It's a call, a cry for you to, perhaps not do better in taking care of your clients, but to do a better job of articulating the value proposition, right? To highlighting the complexity and delivering the simplicity for consumers. Okay, Ryan, thanks for that shout out. And
Interestingly, I saw that, my office is in Montville, New Jersey. And, the other day, I got an email from an agent who I didn't know, but telling me that, her son's going to be looking for a rental property, come the summer. And she gave me the specifics of what they were looking for, so if I was coming up with anything, she just would want a heads up. And it turns out she emailed every agent in my office the same information. So I guess that was her way of reaching out, trying to find inventory that wasn't yet on the MLS, but just wanted a heads up.
Robert, the thing is, you're probably one of two, if not three at the most. I don't know how many agents are in your office that replied. And you see, it's so crazy how few people show up and do that. And I was on a call for a while, so I missed the whole thing about relationships. But I mean, you could do a rental for this woman's daughter, and all of a sudden she knows that you're the authority in your neighborhood, in your area, and she has a buyer, and she's going to call you first. It's amazing how many things fall through the cracks because people just don't show up. But good job showing up, man.
so, I want to highlight something, which is, as of yesterday, I haven't done the commissions yet today. We had 4 intercompany referrals, and 3 of them were either from events we did or from people meeting other agents in our organization through the mastermind that we do here. So big shout out to that. That should be good. And is Sierra, are you on still? I don't know if we lost her or
Hang
not.
on one second. Yep, I'm on.
All right, so we have a new team office. Just waiting the Remax paperwork channel in St. Augustine, and this is our fearless leader, Sierra. You want to
Hi.
just say hi and introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, everybody. I'm over in St. Augustine and part of our big group that we have here. And it's nice to see everybody on today and everyone's smiling faces and gather as much great information as we can together.
Welcome to the
And
Remax
Sierra
Select
comes
Group
to us.
family.
Sierra comes to us through Remax Alliance in Colorado before you became a Remax owner, correct?
Yeah. Yes, Remax Alliance in Colorado was there was a mighty big brokerage, 460 agents out of the office I was in alone.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to our family. And can you just tell us what areas you cover out of your market?
Yes, we are in St. Augustine. We're located in St. Augustine. We also do Palm Coast. I can tell you counties is Clay County and St. Johns County, Duval County, so Jacksonville, Orange Park, Mandarin, Fruit Cove area, Ponte Vedra, Jacks Beach, Atlantic Beach, and what else?
Flagler County.
Flagler County. I have one of our agents here, Sherry Ness is sitting on the side here, helping me out. But yeah, if you have anyone that is looking in these areas, please let us know.
So, welcome to the select group. We're excited.
Thank you.
So The next value proposition, or the next thing that I don't know that our industry articulates well, is we help interpret the market dynamics. And specifically what I mean is the relationship of active inventory, pending transactions, uh, s- prior solds, and the impact of days on market on the historical and the likely sales price of active inventory. Okay. I don't think, and to be honest with you, without doing this research, I probably would just assume and I wouldn't highlight or mention that. So shame on me. And when I prepare for this, I think it just makes me, a better industry professional because I I identify things that I take for granted, and I'm sure many of you might also be in the same boat. You might not emphasize the value that you deliver, the tremendous value. Um, Offer research, right? I think we talked about, how does somebody go about helping somebody make an offer? Um, yeah, I think that needs to be a process, not a chance. Hey, you saw these three houses. What offer do you want to make? To me, that drives me insane. Okay. And I'm that numbers person where I'd be like, look, the last seven sales that went, under contract in the first week, went for 98.2 or 107% of original ask price. And if you like this home, where do you think you want to present your offer? Okay. Um, I've sat outside of conference rooms. I've heard people have conversations and they're like, I don't want to pay any more than 675 for this house. And there's no foundation for that other than an emotional red line that they drew. Right. And does that make any sense? Does that serve the client by having that? I think it's just a defense mechanism that makes them feel like they're able to negotiate. Okay. So giving them offer research and metrics on how things are trading is incredibly helpful. Um, Talk about the components of the offer, right? Let's start our relationship with being positive and say, hey, when we go to make our offer, Sierra, here's what we're gonna have to talk about. We're gonna have to talk about um, price, which is the obvious component. But we're gonna talk about, what are the closing costs? We're gonna ask for concessions. Um, what's the timing? Like, what's the closing date? What's the contingency dates? We're going to talk about how I do the offer presentation, and share with them that communication matters, right? So, we talk about if there's a listing, how many listing agents will share with you information that they shouldn't. I'm going to just ask some people that are doing a lot of transactions. Tony Vero, with your charm, are you able to get people to give you information that they probably shouldn't be telling about their seller when you have a buyer?
Well, if you ask a question, you ask the right question. I always get information about the buyer because if they don't give me information, their offer is never going to be accepted. So,
So Tony, if you're representing a buyer and you call a listing agent and you build good rapport like you're always doing, and then you say, hey, how flexible is your seller? How many listing agents will say, oh yeah, we got room. We probably got 20, 30. Like I've literally heard people, like it's cringeworthy when I'm thinking they're representing the seller. Oh yeah, my seller probably 30, $40,000. Like they're willing to take an offer. Like how do you surrender that um, when you're representing a seller? But if you're a buyer's agent, when you communicate, your job is to do whatever you can for your buyer. And if the seller is going to say, hey, I know we've been on the market for 2 weeks, we're having trouble getting showings, we're thinking about doing a price cut, you're going to use that to your advantage, right? Or
yeah,
if
for sure.
or if you knew that, hey, Tony, my seller's under contract to buy a new place in 5 weeks, and they're gonna have to take out a bridge loan that's gonna cost them like 50 grand if they can't get this closed quickly. So you're gonna gather
Exactly.
that information from your communication skills to take care of your client. Um, the contract period, right? So once you go under contract, that's not where it ends. there's a lot of things that we do as buyer's agents to, either, process oriented or skills based. You might have to negotiate inspection items. You have to clearly coordinate the inspection. You have to coordinate the appraisal. You have to uh, deal with countless things that may come up during the process. You have to, make sure that even though the lender tells your buyer not to buy a new car or furniture or other things, you need to reiterate those things, right? Because
Oh, yes. Oh,
because
yes.
sometimes, buyers just get euphoric and they do kind of silly things. Okay. Um, the settlement. Okay. Who likes to have surprises at a closing?
Nobody.
That's never a good thing, right? So you want to
No.
make sure that that the closing is orchestrated and coordinated. And the way you do that is by you making sure that you align yourself with professionals that deliver the service that will give you a referral worthy experience. And then, post settlement, you know, you want to keep in touch with your clients and not have them become past clients. A big pet peeve of mine is, oh, my past clients. Well, that makes it seem like you've abandoned them, or that they're no longer willing to work with you. So, I keep in communication with my clients. I help them with whatever things that they could use moving to a new community or whatever. Let's see. I want to open up, see if anybody has any questions or if anybody picked up a thing or two today. Anybody?
You said
Well,
before.
I think a good thing to do is to review the contract with the buyer before, to let them know what the agreement is going to look like that they're signing. I think it shows that you're concerned to answer their questions and make them feel comfortable.
Right. So, so I would like, I'm humbly asking you, and you're the best in the industry. I'm humbly asking you to review that document because I literally, while driving back and forth here on spring break, listened to 6 hours worth of podcasts of people that I truly respect in the industry to come up with this content and then to put it into, a format that's executable, right? And it's not because anybody on this call lacks the talent, okay, or they lack the experience. It's about structure, process, and communication. Because you can be the best in the business, but if you can't communicate your value, you're going to get paid where your weakest link breaks, right? So if communication is the piece that you struggle with, then your compensation or your closing rate is going to be impacted negatively or dramatically negatively because of that shortfall. Okay. So I hope that you all got a few things from it. And, I want to go in the last few minutes we have. And Wilson, did you learn anything today?
Always, always feels like you're talking to me. Um, yeah, I think, and one thing I want to add is that the whole buyer broker agreement and all the new paperwork we have, there's three words that have always struck out for me, and it's accountability, honesty, and trust. All three of those words are what these documents provide. Is accountability for us, accountability for our clients. It shows that we are upfront and honest, and it builds trust just by creating that document and being able to explain it in a quick, easy manner for our clients to understand.
And Wilson, there's something that kind of, when you said those two words, there's something I didn't go into, but there's two things that influence outcome. And I guess every business has to compete in a positional advantage and then a capability advantage, right? And I think by being part of Remax or Remax Select Group, gives you a positional advantage because people recognize the brand, right? And the only other piece is just to drive it home by your capability advantage. And capability advantage is not only skills in real estate, it's not only negotiating skills, it's not only local knowledge about where they're looking to buy or sell. It's probably equally dependent upon your ability to communicate that. at least in so much as how you're going to get compensated, right? Because if you're a genius in real estate, but you can't communicate, you're probably out of business.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else? What's what's a big takeaway that you
Hey,
have?
Robert, now I just need to ask you a question. You said that we need to showcase the complexity and what was the other thing that you said about that?
And deliver the simplicity.
Delivery. There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and it's all here in the attachment. If you don't have it, just get used to downloading. A lot of times when I send it out, it will be blank, and you'll probably see it getting refined at 5:30 in the morning if you click on it. But anyway, anybody else? Ryan,
Yeah.
what did you? Go ahead.
One of the things you were talking about is how sellers agents will say things that really they shouldn't say. It's like they're more desperate to sell over the seller and they're disclosing information they shouldn't. So one of the ways I get them to do that is voice to voice. And it's like you've put them in a courtroom and you ask them a question and they feel obligated to answer, even though they shouldn't. So you can really get them to say a lot if you're communicating with your voice over the phone than if it's an email or text. It's just incredible what they will disclose. And it really puts you in a great position for your buyer when you found out that information that helps your buyer get a better deal.
Wonderful. I'm gonna call on Ryan. What did you learn today? All right, he's on something. How about you, Justin? Did you learn anything? He's
Okay, I'm
talking
back.
too.
Sorry, I'm back, Rob, if you want
Go
mine.
ahead.
So what I liked, what you spoke today was when our buyers express their expectations falling short of what we should be delivering, your response, with all due respect, you're not expecting enough. And then just really hounding down on our value that we do bring to the table.
Awesome. I expect you to use that and seek the rewards that will give you from adding that to your communication.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you.
What?
Just to follow up on what Beth said, I always ask the questions that I would not answer if they were asked of me. And you're surprised how many times I get the answers.
So what's
So
an
what's
what's an example of that, Robert?
What's it going to take to make this deal?
Okay.
Agree.
What price is the seller looking for?
Yep.
Just things that seem obvious to me that I would not answer, and yet another agent will.
And I'm going to conclude today by saying that as a buyer's agent, okay, and asking for fair compensation, we should not be in any way embarrassed for our compensation, because we're in a contingency based industry where you can work with somebody for 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months, put a contract together, take it all the way to the day before closing, and the person loses their job. How much do you get paid in that scenario?
Nothing.
Nothing, right? And did you do anything wrong?
No.
No, right? So we are not overpaid. Does anybody feel that our industry on the buyer side is overpaid? I feel like sometimes we underdeliver when we have people who aren't committed to their practice, right? And there are bad lawyers, there are bad doctors, there are bad teachers, and there are bad real estate professionals. But the ones that are good are in no way, shape, or form overpaid. Okay? Maybe the consumer is often underserviced, and that's our mission to correct that and to identify what we're going to do for them. So I hope this helped both 1 to 2 year agents and a 30-year veteran.
Just pee real quick if you're gonna shower.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up. Everybody have a great holiday weekend if you celebrate. Okay.
Go ahead.
One.
Bye, Rob.
Thank you,
Bye,
Rob.
everybody.
Bye, Rob.